Welcome to this DevOps.com workshop, brought to you by Techstrong, AWS, and LaunchDarkly. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting workshop for you today. First, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of this workshop, or you'd like to watch again, follow along, share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you look at the right side of the screen, you'll notice a comments or chat tab. That's where you can go ahead and send in any thoughts you have for us throughout today's program. Any questions will also go there as well. So be sure to blow up that chat tab as much as possible. We want to hear from you guys throughout today's workshop. And of course, before we close, I will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around through the duration of today's workshop. Our program title today is Beyond Continuous Delivery with LaunchDarkly Feature Management. And I'm joined by Cody DeArkland, Director of Developer Relations at LaunchDarkly, Marina Novikova, Partner Solution Architect at AWS, and Alex Hardman, Technical Marketing Engineer at LaunchDarkly. Cody, Marina, Alex, I really appreciate all three of you joining me today. Cody, do you want to take it away from here?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Cody, which is, again, very confusing for me to call you Cody while I'm Cody. It's a really tough thing for me to manage, but I'm getting through it. So as Cody mentioned, I look after developer relations here at LaunchDarkly. I like to say that I actually work for Alex, even though he works for me. It's a complicated thing. We're working through some stuff. Really excited for this workshop. This is a fun one. We did a big revamp on it from the ground up. Huge thanks to Marina for the help with that along the way, and to Alex for testing it. So again, I work at LaunchDarkly. I do developer relations, which is effectively our technical voice out to all of you. Really excited again to get started. Marina, why don't you do just a quick intro on who you are and what is it you do here?
Yeah, hey everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Marina Novikova, Partner Solution Architect at AWS. I work with LaunchDarkly from AWS side to make sure that everything we provide together for our AWS customers is high value. We have high barrier, if you know, in AWS, and we work is like to make sure that any gaps in any platform or solution are address it, and it's easy to use. So happy to help here. Let's listen to what we learned today. We are welcome for any questions. We'll try to address as many as you want. Be active. Welcome everyone.
And I'm Alex Hardman. I'm a technical marketing engineer at LaunchDarkly. And when I met Cody, I couldn't not join, especially after I saw how it worked. So it matches up with the engineering and architecture work I've done before. It's because now I get to do it en masse and get to share with folks how to include feature management in their platforms.
Awesome. So thanks you both for helping me out today. Alex and Marina are both going to be on the Q&A. So we love interaction. They will pop in and stop me if there's a good topic for us to talk about. So please jump in, have some conversation. A little bit of an ergonomic thing. I'm looking at you all right now. I'm looking at my screen right now. And then over here is when I'm just double checking the chat to make sure that there's nothing screaming at me. So it's not me getting distracted. There's also a complex betting pool on how long before my dog starts barking. It's probably going to be, I'm guessing, in the next 7 minutes or so. If you have a bet on that, feel free to drop that in the comments too. That being said, we're going to jump in and get started with some things. So I'm going to share my whole screen. There's a separate bet going on about how long before something random pops up that I don't intend for it to on the screen as a result of sharing the entire thing. But we're here for it. So we covered most of this. I really want to keep the slides to a minimum, so I'm going to blast through these as quick as possible. Intro to our workshop. Beyond continuous delivery, we talk a lot about the CI/CD space, and we like to talk about that LaunchDarkly is effectively kind of the next stage in that whole process and that whole idea of continuously releasing features. And we'll be using AWS in this workshop. We're a big fan of all things AWS. So you've already met everybody here. You can see mine and Alex's Twitter handles below if you want to reach out to us on there. We love interaction, love conversation. So exactly what are we going to do today? This is a technical hands-on workshop. We are going to play with the application. We might even go and explore a little bit of code just to show it off, but we are going to build some stuff here. So we're going to get an AWS account set up as well as a LaunchDarkly account. That was in the workshop prerequisites, so I won't go through those setups in this actual a demonstration. I'm going to assume those were already set up coming in, but if you haven't set those up, highly encourage you to jam out and do that. Get those two things set up because you will want them to do what we're going to do here. We're going to get into our application code, fork it into your own GitHub account. So you'll need to make sure you have a GitHub account handy. We're going to deploy our code out to AWS App Runner, and then we're going to build some feature flags and release some features. So kind of starting with the end, where are we going to end up? By the end of this, we're going to have a React.js application up and running. This is an app that I built that I do a lot of demos off of. Tuned a little bit for this workshop. It'll be running in AWS App Runner. We did that just because it's a really fast way to get a JavaScript, Node.js, React.js in this case, application up and running. There's a ton of different application types that can run in App Runner. A lot of the same stuff would work in ECS as well. If you wanted to run Amazon ECS, or if you wanted to run this in a Kubernetes cluster, you can do that too. We just wanted the lowest path of friction here, which was running App Runner. It's going to be running LaunchDarkly, so you will have that stuff installed in the application code, and we'll bring in your connectivity details to get that working. And then we're going to enable and disable features without having to redeploy. And that's kind of the big, strong capability of the platform. Here's a couple of really helpful links. Most of these, some of these you should already have from the registration. The workshop address, if you want to follow along, is launchdarkly.awsworkshop.io. And then just a couple of other ones, the application code, LaunchDarkly's website, and then some additional learning. My team, Alex and I, as well as a couple other people, we put a lot of effort into getting a lot of our content onto YouTube so that people can explore it and take a look. So please jump on YouTube, explore, take a look at the videos on there, and reach out to us with questions or comment on the videos. Real quick explainer. We're used to this experience with LaunchDarkly of toggle the feature of the platform and the application changes. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind that that you don't see when we go in and do a workshop like this. Your application itself is connected to something called the flag delivery network, and that flag delivery network is pushing out flag changes down into your application. So a lot of what we set up before, the things you don't see as part of this workshop, is the installation of that SDK and ultimately the connection that we end up creating back to this distributed platform. So if you were running this from a phone, you'd be getting the same experience from your feature flags because those are connecting to a global CDN that's returning this information down to your application. So we are going to jump in and build with that a little bit. I mentioned that we're doing this on React.js. That's just because that's the app we built, but we have 20 different, or more than 20 different SDKs that you can integrate with. So while we're doing this in React, you can do this in straight up Node. You can do this in Python. You can do this in Ruby, C#. There's a ton of options there. And here's just a quick glance at all of those options, or many of them at least. There's a couple of additions that have been added over time, but you can see there's a ton of ways you can get this running inside of your application. Whew, that was a sprint. So we're going to jump into the actual workshop now and actually start playing with some things. So I'm going to minimize this. And here we are in our actual workshop. So I'm going to refresh this page. Again, I talked a little bit about what we're doing. If you weren't listening, if your dog was barking in the background, you can see just a quick description of what we're going to be doing here down in the description. So we'll go ahead and cruise forward. This should all go pretty quickly. The longest wait here is going to be deploying out the application, which doesn't really honestly take that long. It's just a necessary component of deploying this, as well as getting your application forked down. So those, you can see the high levels of those different modules down here on the bottom and what we're going to be running through. So we'll want to make sure you have your GitHub account set up, your access to AWS App Runner with the necessary permissions, LaunchDarkly account, either a production account if you are so lucky to have one already, or you've gone and signed up for our 14-day free trial. Beyond that, we're going to fork the GitHub repository. So what that means is you're going to be taking a copy of the code and moving it to your repository so you can work on it locally. If we cruise forward with enough speed, I'll even show you a couple of places that you could change the code for yourself and have it look a little bit different in your own environment. But we'll see how our timing goes. I don't want to promise too much there. And then we're going to jump into LaunchDarkly itself and start creating feature flags and rolling out those changes. And we've got 3 different examples of the way feature flags are rolled out in the platform. So why do we do this? Why does LaunchDarkly actually exist? The challenge with modern application delivery is that it really is an all or nothing approach. I summarize it here on the page. I'm not going to read this word for word, but something to consider is we've kept the idea of the way you deploy applications and the way you consume them very much attached for a very long time. When I was in the enterprise, a lot of times we'd use like tricky DNS things or load balancer tricks to keep people from accessing the application until it was ready. But ultimately, when we started letting people access the app, they were consuming everything about it. So if you've gone from a version 1 to a version 2, you might have rolled out 20, 30 different features. People are consuming all of those features at once. The ones that are broken, the ones that are working fine. If you're one of the like sub 1% of people that have no issues during a new version deployment, that's awesome. But most people find some issues and have some level of problems. The other thing is, even if you don't find problems, you might want to gradually roll these changes out to people and ensure that the adoption's going well, or that it was actually landing the way you wanted it to, or that you could actually test these out before it goes live to everybody. So LaunchDarkly gives you a way to get away from that all or nothing approach by breaking apart the idea of deployment from the idea of releasing features. We can deploy out an actual application and then gradually release the capabilities in that. This helps us control what we refer to as our blast radius, right? When you drop a new feature or a new application that has everything enabled, your blast radius is huge because your entire organization and all of the people that are consuming that application are now a part of the group that's consuming it. That carries risk at a high blast radius. Cruising forward. So talked a little bit about why LaunchDarkly is a place now, but how do we actually do this? Feature flags conceptually are a if-then statement in your code of some type. So what does that mean? We have the ability to evaluate if a flag is true, run this block of code. If it is false, run this one instead. When you start to break your code up in that way and you start to compartmentalize it like that, you can really control the experience that people are getting. If you've created a new logon screen, you can say, I only turn this feature flag on for these users. If there's a problem, you can turn it off and it's no longer there. Can't tell you how many nights I lost doing redeploys when things would go sideways. It's like the scary moment of the pipeline ran and deployed and nothing's working. So now I have to run the previous pipeline in hopes that it blows away the old one and rebuilds the new one. Maybe it takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Maybe it fails halfway through and I have to go change an environment variable. These are all really bad things to have dealing with when an application's down. So LaunchDarkly gives us a way to manage that via those if-then statements inside of your code. We used to talk about this really focused on developer people, right? Only people who are writing code. But ultimately, we see this capability spreading out in the enterprise. Product managers now are using this to control the different user groups that would be consuming an application. SREs are using this to disable problem features or initiate database failovers. Application teams are using this for migration scenarios. So there is a ton of different use cases that we talk about feature flags being used for. And when you adopt this feature-driven development approach, it just opens up a lot of capabilities for you. And I jumped ahead a little bit by talking about some of the use cases just a few moments ago. I think it's important to note that a lot of times people think of feature flags in the idea of visual things, so the way an application changes or the way a new background or a new theme for the page. But ultimately, a feature is nothing more than application functionality. And the consumer of that functionality might not be the customer buying your thing or the regular users using it. Rolling out a new database isn't a feature that traditional users care about, but it's something that somebody inside of your enterprise cares about. And being able to control who's consuming that new database via feature flags gives you a ton of migration capabilities and abilities to just gradually roll that change out. So all that explaining out of the way, let's get to some good stuff. So assuming now, again, you have your AWS account set up with the right permissions, you've got your GitHub account going, and you've signed up for your LaunchDarkly account, we are going to jump into actually building some stuff. We have the steps in the workshop here to go how to go ahead and create your AWS account and the necessary permissions for that. Hopefully you've gone through those steps already. I can't go through them because I already have an account. So these should already be hopefully done inside of your environment. This one is a little bit important. We want to grab inside of your LaunchDarkly account, assuming you've gone and set it up, signed up for that free trial, either through launchdarkly.com or through the AWS Marketplace. Once you've created that account, you'll want to go in and we're going to go ahead and copy the client-side ID for the test environment. So I'm going to show what that looks like now. This is my environment. Assuming that you've already created one, or assuming that you've logged in, you're in what's called the default environment. Because I'm using my default environment for stuff, I'm going to create a new project myself. Projects are how we separate out different LaunchDarkly configurations. So I'm just going to call this one Workshop. I'm going to select this client ID option, or the SDK is using client-side ID because we're doing a JavaScript or a React-based project. So again, taking a quick back look at the workshop flow, navigate to the account settings, projects tab, and then if you named it AWS, in my case, I named it workshop. And we're going to grab that client-side ID from here. So I'm going to grab that and leave that copied. So I copied that on my keyboard. We're going to cruise forward on the flow. We are going to clone down this application, or at least fork it into your repo and use it for deployment. We can see an example here of what that's going to look like eventually. In this section, we're going to actually set up AWS App Runner, deploy the application, use the feature flags, create a few, use them and roll them out, and then target different features at specific user configurations. And I'll talk through the details of that as we get there. But immediately we need to clone down that GitHub repository, at least fork it into its own into your own GitHub account, and then deploy the application in the environment, and then work inside the portal to create those features. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this repo. Actually, I'm not going to click on it because I already have it open here on the side. This is our actual application code. So if you click on this GitHub repository link here, it should take you out to this repository in our LaunchDarkly Labs account. So this is our actual application with a terrible README file that I did not update, which was a mistake on my part. This gives us our actual account or actual application setup. Shout out to Marina for pulling a PR to fix some problems in my account or my actual application. So yay for that. To fork this into yours, if you've gone to this LaunchDarkly Labs, come up here and click this fork button. What that'll do is it'll bring a copy into your repo. So if I click on this now, I can actually go in and set it to go to my account. I already have a fork in there, so it's not super helpful. But if you click on yours, you can send it into your account. And you'll need that there for when we set up the AWS App Runner configuration. A little bit of lingo, just I call that out in the docs, but a little bit of lingo. A fork is just a standalone copy of that application code. Lets you modify it, make changes, pull PRs to send up to the main repository, but it does create your own local copy of that code in your repo where you effectively can change it however you want. Now let's get to the good stuff. We are going to start deploying out AWS App Runner now. So I have all the steps here. I will do my best to follow along with these. A little bit of tab switching, which I'm not wild about doing back and forth, but we will make it work. So I'm going to hit AWS App Runner because I have it set up already in my environment. If you go up here and you type in App Runner, you can see AWS App Runner here as well, and you can start to deploy it from there. Because I already have one running, it's automatically going to look a little bit different than the screenshots are. So I'm sorry about that. But I'll pop back in. I'm going to go create a service, and now things start to look the same. Scrolling down. For our repository type, we're going to select source code repository. And what that's going to do is point at a GitHub environment. So you'll need to set that up here as well. So in this case, I'll go ahead and set it up from scratch. So I'll do add new. And it's going to prompt me for my connection to GitHub. So I already have the GitHub app installed here. I'm going to rename this one. I'll just call it LD AWS Workshop 2. I'm going to use my connection into GitHub. You'll want to install your own. That's just going to ask you for permissions, and you can get as granular as you want. So I obviously recommend add the connection, but add it specifically for the repo that you forked, but you can do it however you want. So I'll do next. Now I have that AWS DevOps workshop listed because that was the one that I had created my permissions around. So I can connect to that. And I highly recommend doing the automatic push. This is super cool because when I eventually get in and show you a couple of ways to mess with the code and change a couple of examples for yourself, when you push that code into the repo, it will automatically take a new version, rebuild it, and deploy it on App Runner. So you can really get into this iterative development cycle where you're truly going in, building a new feature, committing that code into the repo, deploying it, watching the application come back up without the change visible, hop into LaunchDarkly, toggle it on, and see it actually change live. It's a really cool experience to go through. So we'll do automatic. We'll go next. And we're going to configure all of our services here, or all of our settings here. So again, in the code or in the workshop, we went through, we select automatic, we did next. And we're going to do a couple of specific configuration items here. So we did configure all settings. For our runtime, we're going to select Node.js 14. For our build command, we'll do npm install. Start command will be npm run start. So we'll do both of those now. npm run start. We're going to grab our port, 3000, and we're going to hit next. On the next screen, we're going to go ahead and provide out some of the actual detail names. So in this case, we have my AWS Workshop app. So I'm going to plug that in. But I'm going to go my AWS Workshop Cody, just in case Alex is doing this alongside us. I want to make sure that I don't stomp on his application name and break one of our deployments. And this is a very important part. So I named it. We need to add an environment variable, and we're going to add our LaunchDarkly LD client ID in here. So that was the thing I had you copy before. You probably have copied from the workshop text so far. So I'm going to show you how to go back and get it again. If you go into account settings, projects, the name of your environment, assuming you're not using the default, you'll be dropped into this list, and we can grab your client side ID again. So go ahead and copy that. And we're going to create that environment variable, React App LD Client ID. I emphasize this because I definitely messed this up, as Marina knows, while I was building the workshop. So React App LD Client ID. Interesting, just coding note, or more of a React note. In order to do environment variables inside of a React application, you've got to prefix your environment variable with this React app one. So if you just tried to do LD client ID by itself, React won't pick up the environment variable. So good knowledge to have. Plug in our value here, and we should be all good. Let's just confirm the steps before I hit next. Cool. And we are going to go next and create and deploy. So this is starting now, and this part alone takes 1 to 2 minutes to get through. So it's a good moment for us. Marina, Alex, have you seen any questions come through yet? Any discussions popping up?
Not yet so far. Feel free, guys, to ask any question and let us know if you need the time to catch up or any question or any help with the setup. We'll keep you posted like where we are. Thank you, Cody. I think we're good for now.
Yeah. And folks, this part takes a minute just while it builds and deploys the app, and I'm sure there's some DNS stuff going on. So if you did follow along and you got a little stuck or you're not sure, now's an awesome time because we do have a little gap here. I'm sure Cody's going to fill it, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, while this is creating, I think a little speech moment. I love platforms that give you like a low adoption friction. I think that when I look at some of the more like advanced like containerization platforms, it sometimes gets tricky to build out the Docker files the way you want to, or how you're building your image. And then in a Kubernetes world, you have to worry about constructing your deployment manifest and how are you going to make sure these containers are going and getting deployed. What I love about App Runner is it is a low friction service to get something up and running quickly. We talked about this a lot when we were developing the workshop of, hey, how do we want this workshop to go? Do we want to focus on all of the different complex services, or do we just want a thing running? So what I love about AWS in general is they give you those different options for low friction things that just you want to get an app running, we can do that. But if you need the flexibility of customization and advanced features and storage integration for ECS or EKS or any of a dozen other examples, you can go that complex advanced route also. So we did this for simplicity, speed of getting up and running, but I appreciate the flexibility to go either way. Refresh here, we can see the status for the actual build. If we go into activity, we can see it's still creating the actual service. So we're still waiting for this to finish. In the meantime, while this is going, let's jump in and explore some code. Speaking of low friction things that I love, I'm going to jump into my version of this repository. So I'll go coded / what was the repo name? LD AWS DevOps. So LD AWS DevOps Workshop. My branch is currently 4 commits behind. So I'm going to go ahead and fetch an upstream version, which is going to give me the updated code in my local repository, which I love. And now again, talking about low friction things, I love coming into GitHub and being able to just hit the period button and having it actually launch a code editor here. So now I can go in and edit the code for this live and start playing with different capabilities. Now, if I save that and deploy it, it's automatically going to push in the repo, and then it's automatically going to go and do a new App Runner deployment off of that. So I want to be very, very careful about what I do here because I don't want to push out a change and make this take a lot longer. But I did want to give you a couple of examples of how this actually works and where this stuff lives in the code. We usually touch on this when we're creating the first feature flag. Since we have time here, I want to show you now. So I'm going to go into this src directory. This is where the React code lives. So we're getting right into real app code now. And the first thing I'm going to do is go into this index.js file. And what I'm showing here is how the LaunchDarkly SDK gets installed. So up here on line 3, I have where I'm bringing in this LaunchDarkly React Client SDK. So that's just brought in with like a normal npm install. So npm install LaunchDarkly React Client SDK. I import the package from that controls instantiating LaunchDarkly. And in our docs, we go through this configuration of how to bring this in. I'm doing a couple of other things that I'm going to not talk about for now because we're going to get to that later. But I create some definitions around what my user object is and some things I bring in to detect about your device, like as you hit your version of the workshop that we can target off of. But the important bit here is this client-side ID bit, because that's that environment variable that we started off with, right? So bringing in the client-side ID and saying, hey, get this from an environment variable and use this to connect. So once I do that, we wrap our application in this LaunchDarkly provider. So when I say wrap, React in general works through a really strong component design. So what I've done is I've wrapped the entire application component in the LaunchDarkly wrapper, which means all of the components now can use LaunchDarkly configurations in them. So when I go into something like the actual application, we can see that now I'm just bringing in the use flags method from the LaunchDarkly SDK. I can define out the feature flags that I'm going to consume and use them in the actual application code. So earlier I said that effectively feature flags are if-then statements in your code. A good example of that is this card show feature flag down here. If it's true, run this code. If it otherwise, do nothing, right? So in this case, I've developed a new set of UI components that are a set of cards that I want to show on the bottom that load a different release component. If the feature flag is on, run it, show that design. Otherwise, do nothing and fade it away. And we can repeat this kind of process in a number of different ways. We can also bring these in as like string flags. So I could start to replace actual text with a feature flag. So if I wanted a different set of words here, I could do that in feature flags as well. Let's check out our app runner and see if it's up and going. Ooh, things are looking good. Says it's running. So we're going to hit this default domain now. We should see our application come up with any luck. Sometimes DNS takes a little bit for it to finish registering. I apologize for the brightness of my large red screen. Love it. So a couple minutes, we were able to get the application up and running. So welcome to Beyond Continuous Delivery. We are here. We are happy to have you. So this is just the basic application. Markety speech. We talk a lot about the flow of how these things work. You build your application code, you push it into a repository, you deploy out your application, and then you consume the application. That's the common way that applications are built and delivered and used, right? So that's what we're illustrating here. Our app's up and running. We know LaunchDarkly is going. Advanced troubleshooting things. We can pop into development tools and start to see some of the other components. We're seeing a little bit of an error here, so I'm a little worried that maybe the environment variable didn't get pulled in. So we will see if that happens. I might have made a mistake somewhere. So fingers crossed I didn't, though. Let's go check configuration real quick and just see. Oh, we do have it. It's down there. So we will let's see where it goes. React app LD client ID. Just want to make sure. React app LD client ID. All right, fingers crossed that that everything is fine. So we're up and running now. Application is good to go. It's not going to look just like this. This was a out of order screenshot, but it should be up and running for you by now. I talked a little bit about this, just high level of understanding feature flags. When we configure these in a LaunchDarkly platform, what we're doing is setting those up in a way that they can be managed. People are using feature flags in a number of different ways already. They might not be using a feature flag management platform, but they're certainly using config files or environment variables to control. And a lot of times we can control those via feature flags in a really scalable and team manageable way. A lot of different feature flags that we have available. We can use Boolean flags to do true or false evaluation. String flags allow us to deliver text down, right? So if I wanted to deliver a specific connection string, or I wanted to change a small amount of text on a page, maybe a different font size or a CSS selector, I can do that too. Number flags let us just push integers down, right? So these are hard numbers. People use these in really creative ways to set up like rate limiting as an example. And then JSON flags are one that I really love. A lot of times I'll use this if I want to construct some sort of a advanced connection string or an advanced query and I want to push it down. The JSON flags are a really clever way to do that. Just push it down a JSON object that you can then parse and do configurations off of. Beyond that, we have the ability to create prerequisite flags in the platform. And this is where when you start to move beyond the build your own solutions and you start to consume a platform, you really start to appreciate it, because creating those prerequisites on your own requires you to hand script that stuff. But inside of the platform, we can create relationships between feature flags and say, hey, this one can only turn on if these other three are turned on as well. It lets you gradually roll out entire sets of feature flags and say, hey, you can't disable the new, or you can't enable the new header text unless the new logon UI is turned on as well. If you're creating dependencies and relationships between them, from here, we move into creating targets and choosing who's going to get a feature. So you'll see that very quickly in the workshop. We're going to explore that in detail. But a lot of times when you're creating a feature, you should be thinking of it as, I need to create the feature flag. Does this feature flag rely on other ones? If yes or no, configure that as needed, and then configure who you want to consume this feature flag. Now it's time for the fun. Let's get in here and start configuring out the actual feature flags. So we're going to pop into my LaunchDarkly account now. Going to go into feature flags here. Oops, wrong one. Workshop test. Love it. Okay. And we're going to go to create flag and create a prod header flag. So we'll go create flag, and we're going to create a prod header flag. We could give it an actual description if we wanted to. So in this case, I'm going to say this controls the production header feature. We're going to ensure that we're using the client SDK key, which was set up when we did the project anyways. And then we're going to choose if we what we want the flag type to be. So in this case, we're going to do a Boolean, and we're going to maybe give it a name as an option. So new header on, old header, and save our flag. So this is done now. I have a strong feeling this is going to fail because that error I saw, so we'll need to figure that out. But now I'm going to turn this on or off. So if we go, before I save that, I want to make sure that I've done all the steps that you would be seeing. So we did save flag on the bottom. We've configured it, added some text in, saved our flag. And now when I toggle this on, we should see this change happen inside of the application. So there's that. We're going to review and save. We could add a comment in here if we wanted to. I'm going to save the note. And yes, for some reason this failed. I likely messed up the environment variable for it, or the automatic deployment was not to the correct, not from the correct repository. Ah, yes. I brought this over before I had rolled out the new version. So this is still the old version of the application before I pulled in the new changes. So let's take a look at the logs and see when it was rebuilt last, and see if we can just do a quick redeployment of it. So we're going to let it do a new deployment. That was a mistake on my part because I had it go and merge in Marina's changes that I talked about before the service was done deploying. So now we get to wait just a few moments for that to finish. But I'm going to assume that somebody else went through this and was successful. Alex, did you go through it by chance?
I haven't been going through it live here.
You should have pretended that you did.
I mean, yes, I have also been going through this live, and it worked exactly as expected for me, Cody.
Fantastic. I love it. I love to see it. I'd love to hear from the comments in the audience. Has anybody else gone through and done it?
I know we had a couple folks who looked like they were working through it, had some questions. So hopefully some folks are some part of the way through.
Love to see it. Love to see it. Yeah, so just in the interest of transparency and teaching everybody a little bit more while this is redeploying, what had effectively happened was the previous version of this code, I had a mismatch versus the instructions, and it was React App LD SDK key. And what the instructions that you were looking at say is to use, scrolling back a little bit into the previous step here, the instructions that you have say to use React App LD client ID. So what mine said SDK key, mine said client, or the instruction said client ID. Marina caught that and said, hey, we should probably update this. And so we updated that and pushed it into the main repository, which I have access to, so I could connect to that one and have pulled the update from there. But because I wanted to go through the process the same as you all, I actually pointed at my GitHub repo, which, as I mentioned a few moments ago, was several versions behind on what Marina had. So we fixed that, but I'd already started deploying out the application via the workshop. So we just kind of had a little bit of a race condition there. So the deployment's running again.
We have a question if you have example for Java or Python.
Ooh, I definitely have an example handy for Python that we can do. We're going to go, since this is deploying anyways, we'll go ahead and trudge off the beaten path a little bit here to get to that example. So let's see, we'll go OBD. Let's see. Actually, oh, you know what? I know where we'll go. I know where we'll go. Oh no. There it is. Cool. This is a blog post that I wrote. I will go ahead and drop that in the chat. And you can see this was a really fun example I did. The video for this is on our YouTube channel. We actually run a different workshop on this specific example. And what we do in this workshop is we deploy out a simple app in Flask. We bring in LaunchDarkly into it, and we create a feature flag, scrolling for the example. Here we go. We install the SDK, and then we configure the actual application with LaunchDarkly. So you can see in here, here's the actual example code. So we bring in the SDK key, we grab a feature, and we do the evaluations off of it. The repo should be attached to this blog post somewhere in here. So I would definitely suggest checking it out. It should be somewhere in here.
You know what? I can get that for you. Well, I'll find that link, okay, and drop it into the chat.
Love it. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate
No
it.
problem.
This is a good example, though. I definitely have the code in GitHub. So huge Python fan over here. All right, application should be back up and running. Oh, still in progress. So we're not quite there. Not quite there yet. Any second now, it's going to finish up. We can see the health check was successful here. I just want to make sure that it actually picks up the way we expected it to. Refresh real quick. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. So let's watch this now the way it should have been seen. Turn off the feature, save changes. There's our app. Turn the feature on again. Very quickly switch back in. And we can see it's happening live, changing back and forth. That code difference is being evaluated on the fly there. So, hey, if that's our worst demo fail of the day, I feel really good about that. So again, our application's up and running. We are cruising forward now. Let's see, we've gotten through this. We toggled our feature. We can see that matches up with the GIF here on the screen. If you're wondering why this looks a little bit different, it's just a responsive app. So if I shrink down the window, it'll compress the same way that the screenshot has. So looking good. cruising forward. So we're talking about user targeting. I will say this as a vendor shill with wearing a LaunchDarkly shirt. The idea of user targeting was the entire reason that I came to work at LaunchDarkly. And like once I started to understand the capabilities of user targeting, it blew my mind and really like cemented why I think this is the right way to go and the right way to build and ship features. So take that for what it's worth. Huge endorsement there. So user targeting allows us to control who is getting a feature. The way this application was written, we have a couple of options there. You'll see a logon screen when that other feature is turned on. That allows us to capture a user identity. So I might type in Cody, and now I have that as a variable that I can target off of. The application is also written to detect your browser type that's coming in, whether you're on a mobile device or a web browser, and also your OS for the system connecting to it. It's like if you're on Mac OS or Linux OS or a PC. So in this example, you have 3 different things that we can target off of that we're going to play with. I want you to think about the idea of user targeting as the flow in which you would want people to consume an application. Marina, Alex, and I are on this right now. And if we were developing this live, if this was a real application, I might say, I only want the 3 of us to see the new feature. So if I configure my targeting rules right, we can hit the application and get the new feature while nobody else is receiving that feature themselves, right? Nobody else is getting it because they're not part of the targeting group. It's a really powerful way to roll this out, and it gives you the ability to control your entire blast radius. In the notes for the workshop, I include where the feature flags live in the code. So you can definitely click on these links to go and see in the code the specific line that this stuff happens on. We're going to configure user targeting now. So we're going to create a new feature flag, and we're going to create one for the upper image feature. So we're going to go back into LaunchDarkly, back into our feature flags list. We're going to create a feature flag for upper image. Going back into the steps here. We could choose to do a description around it if we want to. In this case, it enables the logo image display. We have some light markdown capabilities in here. So in this case, double star gives me a bold around it. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, enables the upper image to display. Keeping this one as a true or false flag as well. I'm not going to do names this time just to save some time. And our feature flag is available now. So just to take a quick side note, if I pop back into the application code and we take a look at our app.js file, here's where I'm bringing that feature flag into the code. And here's where that actual evaluation happens. So let's zoom in a little bit just to make this a little bit easier to read. Upper image on line 12 and the evaluation on line 24. So if it's true, ternary operator doing the evaluation here, run this code. If it's false, null out the div, so just hide it. So we'll pop back into LaunchDarkly now, or should pop into our steps, I should say. Within the feature flag configuration screen, we're going to select Add User Targets under the Individual Targeting section. If it's true, we want to target the workshop user. If it's true, we'll leave false blank, and we're going to change our defaults. So we'll do that now. Individual targeting. In the steps, I tell you to type in a workshop user. So I'm going to do that as well. So if true, workshop user. False, do nothing, but change the default rule. What this does is says everybody who connects to the application, if they're not part of a targeting group, gets false. Workshop user gets true. You can immediately see here what we've created. We've created the ability to roll this out to one user in our production environment. The rest of people will never have that code execute. So if you've broken something, if you've got a bad image link, if you've got a database query that is written wrong and is going to do 1,000 inserts a second, the only person who's going to trigger that is the user who's true. Everybody else is not going to evaluate that code. We're going to turn that feature flag on and hit save. And what we'll see, if we've done it right, is nothing should change. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to type in Cody. On the bottom, workshop users Cody. Nothing has changed. However, if I type in workshop user and hit login, we can see I've deployed a new image out. That image is a very tiny image on the top of the screen because my resolution is massive on this computer. But you can see the features there. If I clear the user out, nothing's there. It's not evaluating for anybody. If I come in and type in Alex and hit enter, it doesn't work. Type in workshop user again and hit submit. Item comes back. So again, this is a direct parallel to targeting people in your team that you would want to roll a feature out to. Right? This is, in most cases, when I work with a small dev team, I'm targeting the other people on my dev team and saying, hey, let's all go give this a shot and see what happens. But with this, I don't have to give out a weird, handcrafted dev environment URL. Words are hard. I don't have to give out that separate dev URL. I can test this in production, roll it out to people. I can test this in smaller environments, roll it out to people. I can do this locally as well, roll it out to people and have them connect into it. It's pretty cool, I think. If you're not doing this long, you can see the GIF here on the bottom that lets you see the change. Type in workshop user, hit submit, image shows up, and it loops back and forth. Individual targeting is great for when you want to target specific users, specific people. But a lot of times that doesn't scale great, right? Like in the sense of if I'm going in and manually typing in over and over again all the different users, that's pretty painful. And when you clear that out by mistake, you're really frustrated because you had 57 people in that single entry list, and now you have to recreate those 57 people all over again. It's not fun. Nobody wants to do that. Not a great experience. So to make that easier, we use the idea of targeting rules that will let you create effectively groups of users in the platform. So we're going to do a rule-based target now that'll hit a broader swath of users in this case. So we're going to go in and do a create flag for this card show feature. Let's pop back into LaunchDarkly. We've got 2 feature flags now going. We are real developers now. Card show enables the new release cards to display. Super cool when I talk aloud. We'll save that flag. It's now created just like we would do in our actual workshop. Save flag. Here's our steps. Looking good. And we're going to create our rule. And within that screen, we're going to do add rule. And we're going to say for device, if it's a browser, do this. And I'm going to see if we can hack it a little bit into working the way I want it to. I don't know if I can change the device identifier very easily from my desktop, but see what we can do. We're going to add a rule. I'm going to say browser devices. Or say device type is one of browser. Now I could also, the way this is configured, I could come in and say mobile and create that if I wanted to. You might be wondering, where does this value come from? If we go over here on this user section on the left, you can see all of the users who have connected to your environment. If I go in and select somebody like Alex in this case, that was the one I had logged in as, not Alex Hardman on this call. You can see a couple of attributes that are coming in. This is the user configuration screen. Lets you really control granular things that a specific user has come in with. So in this case, Alex coming in as a user, his device was a browser, and his operating system was Mac OS. I can also force a change for Alex to make him different than anybody else if I wanted to. This is where you would see all of the different possibilities that have come in from your application. Interesting thing, because this is all hosted on AWS App Runner, I'm going to grab this URL. I'm going to grab my phone in front of you all. I'm going to load up the website. So getting close to my camera, we can see the application's running. This is now configured to run two different versions of the app. One is a mobile browser and one is the desktop browser. We're going to cruise back to that feature flag and configure this feature now the way I was just starting to talk about. We're going to add that rule like I talked about. We're going to say, don't display on mobile. So I think that's how it's configured in the workshop. A browser only feature. So for the sake of consistency, we'll say that. Browser only feature. Device type is one of browser. Set it to true. For everyone else, set it to false. So this lets me create a rule around a group saying only target these people with this change, only target browser people with this change. Looking good. We'll review and save. Now, if I bring up the mobile device, because that's the more interesting one to do, we can see nothing has changed. But if I go into the application itself, we can see that that feature has been released. So I'm going to refresh the screen just to be safe. We can see that coming up now. But there's a difference here between the two devices. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold my camera up or hold my camera to my phone. And I'm going to pop back into LaunchDarkly. And I'm going to flip this around. And I'm going to type in mobile. We're going to watch that. Oh, it doesn't help when this moving too slow. Doesn't help when the screen timer kicks in. So there's that. Review and save. And you can see that just showed up on the bottom of the screen. But if we go back into the application now, it's not showing up. So that's how we roll out changes like that. So again, we changed that default rule, controlled it, and we can see in the screenshot on the right here how this happens. So that's the end of the actual workshop. But let's talk about a couple of other things real quick, since we got a little bit ahead of schedule and we're doing pretty good. So one thing I want to show that we didn't get to add into the actual workshop is the idea of how do we take this rule and make it more scalable, right? How do we take this rule here that we've created and make it something we can reuse in a bunch of different ways? The answer to that is segments. Segments let you configure cohorts of users. That's a really weird phrase, I get it, but a group of users who are doing a thing. So as an example, I could come in and create a segment called mobile users. And I can start to build out the rules here for mobile users. If device is one of mobile, do all users. Save the change, and now I have a segment for mobile users. I can go back into that configuration for the card show feature. And instead of writing out this rule from scratch, I could come and say, user is in the segment of mobile users, set it to true, set it to false for everybody else. Once again, come in, save the changes. And the exact same way now is playing out as I would expect. So that lets me create a reusable set of users around that configuration. There's a lot of different segment types that you could create. I would encourage you to think of this in the way that you would roll out a feature to users. We're here with AWS, which we love. Think about the idea of a multi-AZ deployment, multiple different availability zone deployment. You might say, I'm going to roll out a database configuration for each region in my environment. I want my US West users to be hitting the US West database instead, and I want to do that from 2 a.m. to 6 p.m. I could go in and create a segment for West users, use a targeting property of some sort to do that. One of the ones I worked with a customer on, they, as part of their website sign-up process, they collected time zone, right? So you can assume Pacific Standard Time is likely a West Coast configured time zone. So what we did is we said US West was the property of time zone when it was PST. And we use that to configure the rule to say, during these specific hours, run a workflow that would turn the feature on for users from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. so they could test out that new functionality. If you wanted to be able to take an API offline and have it offline only for the West, you can do that as well and say, hey, US West users, it's disabled for you, but everyone else can still consume it, right? So this gives you a ton of flexibility to control what groups consume a feature, but in a very reusable way and in a way that you can start to scale. Our biggest customers use segments all the time to roll out feature changes. And that's why if you saw briefly this idea of big segments in here, big segments are basically huge versions of those segments. Just checking the chat out. I saw there's a little problem with the submit a user text box. That's weird.
Yeah, somebody was just let's see, I think Sridevi was having trouble getting the login box to show up. I was thinking that was the prod header flag that controlled that.
The prod header flag is the one that controls that. If we take a look at the application code, prod headers right here. When it's true, we run the logon component or the login component as well as the header component. So both of those load up as long as it's true. To Marina's point, if you haven't configured the feature flag or it's not showing up, that's a bad sign. That's why it's probably not there. Easy way to double check this is you can come into the application and hit F12 on your keyboard. It's going to give you dev tools. And if you have not configured your SDK key, you're going to have a lot of red text here that's going to say, hey, I'm not getting a connection back to LaunchDarkly. Something is sad and broken. Please fix me. some text along those lines. So check that out. That's a good way to do dev testing. Another way that you can validate this is by looking in LaunchDarkly, looking at your feature flags. And if you go into any of them, you can see the last time it was evaluated. So in this case, it was 4 minutes ago. This is a little bit lagged, so it takes a few for it to re-trigger and re-update this, but it's a good way to also validate. If it says never evaluated, yeah, you've got an SDK connection problem of some sort.
That's a really good point. Those troubleshooting tips are really helpful, Cody, because that, like, when it's never been evaluated, you know that your app isn't talking to it here.
Yep, exactly. So we're about to wrap up. If there's questions in the chat, please definitely ask. Last thing I'll say, we're big on integrations, right? So big on ways to tie in LaunchDarkly to other systems. If we go into integrations, there is a ton of options in here of ways you can tie in. A great one, for example, is Amazon Kinesis, being able to take events that happen inside of LaunchDarkly and send those out to Kinesis for data processing and to do things with. A couple of my favorites in here that are worth mentioning. We've got some cool observability ones. We got some cool tie-ins with Circle CI for pipelining. Some great webhook tie-ins. So there's a ton of different ways you can integrate LaunchDarkly into your environment. So we've got new integrations coming out all the time. I love the VS Code integration. We did a video on that. Brian from my team did one. It's a very popular video. It's a very cool integration. It gives you the ability to manage feature flags directly from Visual Studio Code. So that's a great way to manage an environment too. And I think that about wraps us up from a workshop standpoint. Really enjoy everyone, or really appreciate everyone for showing up. I enjoyed seeing the interactions in the chat. Definitely reach out to Alex, myself, Marina, if you have questions. We want to hear from you. We want to hear how this could be better. This is just an introduction to feature flagging. There's a ton of stuff you can do in LaunchDarkly that goes the next steps. If you want to progressively roll out features, we can do that. Experimentation is a huge one, right? We talked about knowing what feature we want to roll out, but how do you prove that with data? How do you look and see if you should roll out a feature? Experimentation lets you make data-driven decisions around features you might roll out. So we didn't even touch that in this workshop today. That's a whole nother adventure. Some of the integrations, as I mentioned, those ones are great, but we want to hear from you. We want to hear how you're launching Darkly, and we want to hear more about your story. So I appreciate everyone for showing up. Cody, am I handing back to you for the old gift card time?
I think it's about time for that. But Cody, Alex, Marina, thank you all. Cody, do you have something to say?
No, I was saying thank you. I just stopped sharing.
Of course. So Cody, Alex, Marina, we really appreciate all three of you stopping by and helping us through this workshop and this walkthrough. I know with all the preparation gone into this, I know people will be able to watch again, follow along again, and this can be used in perpetuity. So this was an excellent workshop, lots of engagement. Congratulations on throwing a great workshop, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right. And to our audience, just a reminder that this session was recorded. So following this workshop, you'll receive an email with a link to access that recording on demand. You can also find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section. So we do have those 4 $25 Amazon gift cards to give out. Our first winner is Natalia C. Our second winner is William N. Our third winner is Craig S. And our fourth and final winner is Sumant R. So to the 4 of you, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. But if you don't happen to see that email, check your spam folder. To AWS and LaunchDarkly, thank you so much for sponsoring today's workshop. And to our audience, we really, really appreciate you spending time with us. Just a reminder, you can rewatch this workshop. So please rewatch it, follow along, check it out again and again. Cody, Alex, Marina, thank you so much.
Thank you,
everyone
everyone.
else, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.